Okay, here we go. We're going to take a look at 9 different items. I think there are a total of 9, or is it 10? It looks to me like it's 9 only. Okay, in this test, this is the first test found at the bottom of, which is in the 5th section of lesson 1.35. And you're going to look at the statement like you always do. You're going to think of how you'd say this statement. And I'm going to read you 4 possible answers, 4 possible correct statements, and you choose the one which is correct. And then what we're going to do, instead of, like we usually do, instead of me giving you the answers at the very end, we talk about a couple of them. We're going to do one item at a time. I'm going to give you the correct answer. Then we're going to stop and talk about why it's correct and why the others aren't. Okay? All right, so here we go. Número 1. Miren, piensen y vamos. A. Tú leer un libro. B. Tú lee un libro. C. Tú leo un libro. D. Tú lees un libro. Okay. Hopefully by now you've marked your answer. Well, the correct answer is D. Tú lees un libro. And this sentence really is just bringing up the point of verb conjugation, that you've learned how to conjugate a verb. Now, you don't know what that means, but you know how to do it. Conjugation, or to conjugate a verb, means forming the verb, the action, so that it's in the form that matches its subject. For example, with leer, let's take leer as the example, since it's the one used here. If I say yo, I'm going to drop the er sound at the end and put o in. So I will say yo leo. If I want to talk to you and say that you do the reading, I say tú. What's the sound I put at the end of the verb with tú as a subject? S, right. Tú lees. Él lee. Ella lee. Usted lee. And so in this particular sentence, or this particular item I should say, we said the D was tú lees, and tú and s match. They go together, so the verb is correctly formed. Number 1 was tú leer un libro. Tu leer is the way you originally learned that verb, and it's not been adapted or formed or conjugated to fit its subject of tu. And so tu leer doesn't make any sense at all. In the same way, number 2, tu lee, it's closer. I dropped the r sound from the end, but the s is not found at the end of the verb, so that's wrong. And the last of all, tú leo, that's way off. Tú leo. When is o used? What's the subject? That means the one doing the action when you put an o at the end of the verb. Yeah, it's yo. Yo leo, not tú leo. ¿Verdad? Okay, let's move on to number 2. This is also a matter of verb conjugation, as you'll hear in a moment. Okay, look at the sentence. Think how you'd say it. Now, this is a verb which, it's one of these kind of verbs. One of the irregular, weird ones that you haven't yet that maybe you haven't yet heard a great deal. But let's see if you recognize the correct form here. Okay, here we go. A. Yo soy profesor. No. That's B. A is, let's try that again. A is yo es profesor. Yo es profesor. B. Yo soy profesor. C. Yo ero profesor. D. Yo seré profesor. Since I mangled that, let me say it to you again. A. Yo es profesor. B. Yo soy profesor. C. Yo ero profesor. D. Yo seré profesor. Mark your answer. Well, the correct answer was B. Yo soy profesor. This kind of verb, as I mentioned, is an irregular, weird verb. An irregular verb is one where you really pretty much have to memorize its forms because it doesn't follow the usual pattern. The usual pattern is when I talk about myself, I drop the r sound from the end of the verb, or the a, the er, the id sound from the end of the verb, and I put an o at the end, right? And if I'm talking to you, I put a s at the end. And if I'm talking about him or about her, or I'm speaking formally to my great-great-grandfather, I'm going to drop off the r sound from the end of the verb. However, this is not one of those kinds. It doesn't follow the usual pattern. You simply have to memorize the correct forms. With the verb ser, which means to be, yo soy would be I am, you are, he is. This is the verb we're talking about. Yo soy. It's not o at the end. It's oy is a sound at the end. And then tú, with ser, you would think that tú would be tú ses. But it's not tú ses. It changes entirely to tú eres. Tú eres. And it's not, for example, él, ella, usted, you think that ser would become se. And it's not se, it's es. Yo, él es, ella es, usted es. So this is a verb you have to memorize. Just repeat it over and over and over again until you know all of its forms. And that's why I put it in this section here. Number 1 represents the regular, normal verbs. Number 2 represents the irregular verbs, like venir. You don't have to say yo with venir. It's yo. It's not yo vengo, like you wish it were. It's yo vengo. Just like tener is not yo tengo, it's yo tengo. And there are many other, sadly, irregular verbs that you'll simply have to memorize and learn through experience. They don't follow the usual pattern, and this was one of them. Okay, let's go on to number 3. This is another type of verb. It's called a reflexive verb, and that's why number 3 is here, to represent that category. At this point, I believe you only know 2 of them. Irse, I know 3. Levantarse and quedarse. What do all 3 of those have in common? Yeah, they've got a sound at the end, which is se. And that se, at the end of the verb, does it stay there when you put it together with a subject? Nah, da, 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 da. You may remember that, huh? And so let me give you the answers first. You choose the right answer, then I'll explain. Okay, número 3. A. Look at it, think of how you'd say this. It's a tough one. Okay, A. Ella sentarse en la silla. B. Ella me sienta en la silla. C. Ella le sienta en la silla. D. Ella se sienta en la silla. Choose which one you think is right. Okay. Well, the correct answer was D. Ella se sienta en la silla. Now, here's why. When you have one of these kinds of verbs called reflexive verbs, where there's a se at the end of it, once you give it a subject, one of these, that se pops off the end of the verb and passes before it, and then it adjusts, it adapts to whatever the subject is. If I am the subject and I'm the one who's doing the sitting down, I will say yo me siento. Yo me siento. If you're the one sitting down, this se, which is on the end, sentarse, passes beforehand, before the verb, and it's going to adjust to tú. And the form that it takes when tú is a subject is te. Tú, te, sienta. What's going to be the last sound of the verb? What's the last sound of the verb going to be when tú is a subject? S, right. Tú te sientas. Tú te sientas. If he is a subject, he's the one who's doing the sitting down, and I'm using the verb sentarse to sit down. The se pops off the end, goes beforehand, da, 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 and it doesn't change. With él, ella, and usted, se remains se. Él se. Now, what do we do to a verb when él is a subject? Él se sienta, or ella se sienta, or usted se siento. So listen to all 5 of those again one more time. Yo me siento, tú te sientas, él se sienta, ella se sienta, usted se sienta is how that verb, that reflexive verb is used. So what was wrong with the other forms? Ella sentarse, the se, I didn't take it off the end. I kind of kept it on the end, and I tried to pretend it was a verb ending with an a. It was mangled. It was wrong. And then ella me sienta. Ella and me don't go together, do they? Yo me, tú te, ella se sienta. Yo me siento, tú te sientas, ella se sienta. So ella me sienta doesn't make any sense. Ella and me don't go together with this kind of a verb. And then last of all, ella, excuse me, I skipped one there. Ella le sienta. Le is not even one of the options at this point. Huh? It's going to be yo me, or tú te, or él se, ella se, usted se. There's no le in there at all. So ella le sienta en la silla makes no sense whatsoever. Let's go on number 4. Okay, una pregunta. So this is the question that represents the first type of question, an affirmative question. Okay. Letra A. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? B. Tú piensas en la familia, ¿verdad? C. ¿Piensas en la familia? D. ¿Piensa tú en la familia? One more time. That was kind of tough. So let me read all 4 of them again. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? B. ¿Tú piensas en la familia, verdad? C. ¿Piensas en la familia? D. ¿Piensa tú en la familia? The answer. ¿Cuál es la respuesta? Noten, por favor. Okay, now that's a tricky one. C is the correct answer. ¿Piensas en la familia? But let me ask you something. Where did the tú go? If that's the correct answer, how come there's no tú in it? Here's tú. Right here, the image is tú. Tú. If this were a sentence, a statement, I should say, not a question, I would say, ¿tú piensas en la familia? By the way, that en, that sounds funny to you too, doesn't it? In Spanish, when you use the verb pensar, and you're talking about thinking about something or someone, you always follow it with the word en. En usually is the word in. It's like you're thinking in this family, for example, but that is they're occupying your mind. So just remember the pensar, you always follow it with en. But in any case, I said that in all 4 sentences, so that shouldn't throw you off. So, ¿tú piensas en la familia? Well, when I make a question of it, tú and piensas should become ¿piensas tú en la familia? Now, that tú, where'd it go? Well, remember, how can you tell, even without the tú appearing in the sentence, that I'm talking to you when I ask that question? Yeah, I'm using tú as a subject. You know it because piensa, I'm ending the verb's sound, or the verb with the sound s. So the tú really is not necessary. It doesn't need to be there. Just by piensas, you know I'm talking to you. So I can simply say, ¿piensas en la familia? Now, what was wrong with the other 3? Well, nothing was wrong with 2 of the other 3, except for the fact that that was not what I was asking for, the type of question that they formed. Number 1 said, ¿tú piensas en la familia? That's not either of the 2 types of questions that I formally or officially have taught you. You can't, but this is possible. This is an informal question. You can simply make a statement. Look at the statement here. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? All right? And turn it into a question by just raising your voice. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? I'm going the wrong direction. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? That is a valid question in Spanish too, although it's not a formal question. A formal question is going to use either this inversion, or it's going to have an end question like verdad or no. Okay? And so this was just the wrong type of question, but you really could say, ¿tú piensas en la familia? And then the number 2, or letter B I should say, excuse me, is a valid question also. ¿Tú piensas en la familia? ¿Verdad? It really means the same thing as piensas en la familia. Essentially the same thing, very close anyway. But that's not the kind of question I was looking for. I wanted the type 1 question, which is when we use inversion. Okay? Now I said that piensas en la familia and tú piensas en la familia, ¿verdad? Were essentially the same. Let me show you why they're not exactly the same. They're both valid questions, but when you say to someone, ¿piensas en la familia?, you are not anticipating either a yes or a no answer. The answer is wide open. It could be either yes, I'm thinking about the family, or no, I'm not thinking about the family at all. Okay, you don't know how the person's going to answer. But if you say, tú piensas en la familia, ¿verdad? That means you're expecting that they're going to say, yeah, it's true, I'm thinking about my family. When you're saying, en tú piensas en la familia, ¿verdad? You're saying, you're thinking about your family, aren't you? Which means I have a suspicion, I expect you're going to say yes. So you see, those two questions aren't exactly the same, but they're getting at the same issue, aren't they? Trying to get more or less the same information. Okay, número 5. This is an even more complex one. It's not only a question this time of the first type, but it's a negative question. Let's see if you know how to make a statement negative and then turn that into a question. Número 5. A. ¿Aprende él no español? B. ¿Aprende español? No. C. Él no aprende español. D. ¿No aprende español? Let me read those again to you. A. ¿Aprende él no español? B. ¿Aprende español? No. C. Él no aprende español. D. ¿No aprende español? Ok, noten su respuesta. A, B, C, o D. Okay, the answer was D, letter D, D, which is no aprende español. Now, again, identical situation as in the last sentence. Here we have él, okay? We're trying to ask, doesn't he learn Spanish? No aprende español. But where did the él go in my statement? Well, if this were, or in my question, I should say, if this were a statement, it would be él no aprende español. Él no aprende español. And then él in aprende would be inverted, reversed to form the question. Now, the no is always going to go before the action, which is negating, the verb, in other words. So let's see where the verb is. Él aprende, aprende él. Now, so where's the no going to go? It's going to go before the verb. No aprende él español. That would be okay. But do I really need the él? Well, in a way, you might think, yes, you do, because there are 3 different forms or 3 different subjects, él, ella, and usted, that can all have, the verb will all sound the same. Aprende, right? Just chop off the ch. So how do we know if it's él? If you're talking about doesn't he learn Spanish, or doesn't she learn Spanish, or don't you, sir, learn Spanish? How do you know? Well, I'm assuming that if a person uses the word él, he, somewhere in the conversation prior to that question, it must have been clear about whom he were speaking. I wouldn't just say he if you didn't know. I'll show you what I mean. I'd like you to tell me, as you're thinking about that particular interview, where did he say he lives? Well, if you've watched all the classes up to this point, you're saying, who? Who are you talking about? Where does who say he lives? You know, Eduardo, the guy from Venezuela. I say, Eduardo lives in the country, en el campo, con su familia, en una casa. Okay, now you can answer it. I would never just say to you, hey, where does he live? And you say, who? What are you talking about? It's obvious that I would first give you the information as to fill you in on about whom I'm speaking. And so we're assuming that when I say él, that prior to that question formed with él, that we already knew about whom we're speaking. I'd already mentioned about whom we're speaking. So normally, no aprende él. The él is not really necessary. We can just say, no aprende español. Doesn't he learn Spanish? And you know who that he is. Now, if not, what would I do? What if I wanted to say, doesn't Eduardo, because you didn't know I was talking about Eduardo, doesn't Eduardo learn Spanish? You would say, here's Eduardo, here's aprende. No aprende Eduardo español. Okay? Then I would say his name to make sure you knew about whom I was speaking, but normally it's not necessary. When él is used, it assumes you already know about whom we're speaking. Does that make sense? I hope so. Número 6. Vamos pues. Número 6. A. Yo buscar y encontrar el dinero. B. Yo busco y encuentro el dinero. C. Yo buscar y encuentro el dinero. D. Yo busco encontrar el dinero. A, B, C, or D. Well, before I even tell the correct answer, let's just talk about this kind of a sentence. Not too long ago I mentioned when you've got two verbs in the sentence and there's nothing separating them, the second of them is going to be in the original form. You're not going to touch it. You're just going to repeat it the way you originally learned it. All right. As for example, if I want to say, I want to learn Spanish. Here's want and here's learn. Both of them are actions. Both are verbs. But the first of the two is what I'm actually doing. I'm wanting. Am I learning Spanish? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But what I'm doing right now in this sentence, what I'm talking about is wanting. So, yo quiero, I'm going to change it to fit the subject. Yo quiero, but the second verb, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to say it in its original form, the long form, the way you learned it. What's the verb? This verb right here? Yeah, don't say aprendo, don't say aprendes or aprende. That's not what the verb is. The verb's real name is, its original form is aprender, isn't it? So, yo quiero aprender español. Okay, that's the structure we're talking about. But in this sentence, that's not what we've got, is it? We've got two verbs. You can tell by the two red shirts, we've got two different verbs, but they're separated. They're not together, side by side. They're separated by the word y, which is and. Okay? And so what we're assuming here, what we're saying in essence is, I do this, and I do this to this. And did I read the sentences to you already? I think, I don't know if I did. I think I did. Yeah, I did. Okay. So, yo busco, because I'm doing the action, I'm going to actually change the verb to fit the subject. Yo busco y encuentro. Encuentro el dinero. Busco y encuentro el dinero. Notice, by the way, I just said busco y encuentro. Do I need to say yo? No, I don't have to say yo. I typically do so in the first unit of the Ulat, but you don't have to say the yo. As long as you have an o sound at the end of the verb, everyone knows you're talking about yourself. You're saying yo. So, busco y encuentro el dinero. All right, both verbs are conjugated. That means they're formed to fit yo as the subject because we have the word and here, meaning that both actions are, I am doing both actions. Okay, let's try number 7. This is really complex. We've got 3 guys with red shirts. All right, see if you can pick out. Did I give you the correct answer? I hope I did. The correct answer, therefore, to this one was, I don't even know if I read the sentences to you. Let's do it again real fast. A. Yo buscar y encontrar el dinero. B. Yo busco y encuentro el dinero. C. Yo buscar y encuentro el dinero. D. Yo busco encontrar el dinero. Well, since I already explained it to you, hopefully you know that B is the correct answer. Yo busco y encuentro el dinero. The subject is doing both actions, so we conjugate both verbs. Can I use the word conjugate now? Do you understand what it means? To fit the verb to the subject, which it has. Okay. Número 7. Número 7. Look at the sentence. Take a wild guess at how you form a statement with 3 different verbs in it. We know when verbs are located side by side, one is going to be formed or conjugated, and the next will be in the original form. What's going to be how about the next one? Well, that's what we're going to find out. A. Yo quiero saber hablar inglés. B. Yo quiero sé hablo inglés. C. Yo querer saber hablar inglés. D. Yo quiero saber hablo inglés. One more time with gusto. Here we go again. Número rápido, pues. Yo quiero saber hablar inglés. B. Yo quiero sé hablo inglés. C. Yo querer saber hablar inglés. D. Yo quiero saber hablo inglés. A, B, C o D. ¿Qué piensan ustedes? What do you think? Well, it's letter A. Listen to it again. Yo quiero. So the first verb, we're going to conjugate it, because that's, by the way, do you remember my explanation from last time? I said the way I think of it is this way. Which of these actions is the person, the subject of the sentence, actually doing? Well, what the sentence means is, I want to know how to, or that is to learn, to know how to speak English. I want to know how to speak English. Which of those three things is the person actually doing? They're wanting. They don't know, and they're not talking, or at least they're not talking in English, and so they're not actually doing these two activities. The only thing they're doing is this right here. They're wanting to speak, to know how to speak English. And so that's why I would conjugate, or I would form this verb to fit the subject and not the other two. That's my way of thinking of it. If you prefer, when there are two verbs next to each other, or even three next to each other, conjugate the first, don't touch the next two. Unless you have the word and in between. That's a different question. Okay, but there's not and here. So, yo quiero saber hablar inglés. First conjugated, next two in the original infinitive form. Should I describe the rest of it? I'll go quickly. B was wrong because it says yo quiero sé, which is the way you say I know, but when know is being conjugated, the verb saber, yo sé, but we don't want to conjugate it here. We want to leave it in its original form. So it's not yo quiero sé hablo inglés, which hablo isn't conjugated either. It is conjugated, it shouldn't be. Sí, yo querer, you can't say yo querer, because this is the action the subject is doing. You have to conjugate it. You have to say yo quiero. And then, where's the next line? D is wrong as well, because it says, yo quiero saber hablo inglés. Yo quiero, so far so good. Saber, so far so good. Hablo. You've got to use the original form of this last verb. The subject's not doing that action. All he's doing is wanting. He's not speaking. So, yo quiero saber hablar inglés. Número 8. Número 8. A, B, C, D. Ok, miren la frase y piensen en lo que van a decir. This is a tough one. You not only have two verbs next to each other, you've got the verb gustar, which we know is a tough, challenging, cantankerous verb. Okay? So what you're saying here is you like to know and help children, or the children. Okay? Okay, vamos. A. ¿Te gusta, conoces y ayudas a los niños? B. ¿Te gusta conocer y ayudar los niños? Oh, that sounded pretty good to me. C. ¿Te gusta conocer y ayudar a los niños? Oh, that sounded pretty good to me too. D. ¿Te gustas conocer y ayudar a los niños? Gustas. I've never heard gustas. I've heard gusta and gustan. Forget it. Okay. Want to hear it one more time? All of them? A, B, C, D. ¿Te gusta conoces y ayudas a los niños? B. ¿Te gusta conocer y ayudar los niños? C. ¿Te gusta conocer y ayudar a los niños? Man, it sounded like the same as the last one. It wasn't though. And then, ¿te gustas conocer y ayudar a los niños? Get rid of the te gustas one right away. Let's go back to A. ¿Te gusta conoces? Wait a minute. Two verbs side by side. Te gusta. That looks good enough to me. Te gusta. I'm used to that by now. But conoces? Nah, it's going to be conocer. Don't touch it. In the original form, te gusta conocer, you got to say. You got to say conocer. In fact, well, that's just the way it is. You can't change both of them, conjugate both of them when they're side by side. So te gusta conoces is not possible. It's got to be B or C, but they sound like the same one to me. Listen to them one more time. B. Te gusta conocer y ayudar los niños. C. Te gusta conocer y ayudar a los niños. What was the sound, additional sound you heard in C that you didn't hear in B? Yeah, it's A. Te gusta conocer y ayudar a los niños. This is why this sentence is in here. It represents a challenging point of grammar from Unit 1. It's called the personal a. Now, if you're an elementary school student right now, you might want to do this. Your parents are in the process of ripping your hands away. They want you to listen to this, but it's going to be tough, especially if I have to talk about direct objects and a direct object in a sentence. They're going to tune out, okay? So I'm going to try and simplify my explanation as much as I possibly can. This guy right here, tú, is the one doing the action. You're the one doing the action, and this is the action, which is the action of liking. You like something, okay? In fact, let me find a simpler sentence. Here's a better sentence. No, that's not a good sentence. I don't know if any of these will be. I will make up a sentence for you from right here from scratch. Okay. This is a computer monitor, un monitor. Okay. Yo miro el monitor. Yo miro el monitor. That's pretty straightforward. I'm doing the action of looking, and the thing that's getting looked at is the monitor. That's called a direct object. But anyway, this thing which is getting looked at, and I say, yo miro el monitor, it's a thing, isn't it? I wouldn't mind hitting it. It's not a person at all. And so I say, yo miro el monitor. However, just a moment, please. Let's take my old friend Freddie here, whom you guys haven't seen for a while, but here he is. Okay, it's good to see him again, isn't it? Okay. Yo miro Freddy. That's wrong. That's not the way you say it in Spanish. Sounds good. I look at Freddy, right? Okay? But that's not the way it's done in Spanish. I'm the one that's doing the looking. I'm called a subject. This is the thing I'm doing. That's called a verb. The one who's getting looked at is called a direct object, but who cares? If what's getting looked at is a person, not a thing like this monitor over here, I have to put the word a before the word referring to the person, which in this case is Freddy's name. Yo miro a Freddy. Because he's a person. A monitor, just a second here. Let's get him back here. So two of them are together. Okay? This is not a person. This is. I say, yo miro el monitor. This is the person. Yo miro a Freddy. Huh? Or, even it could be a word referring to a person, not the person's name. Like, el muchacho. El famoso muchacho. Yo miro, ¿qué más puedo mirar? Eso es un espejo. Un espejo. That's going to freak you out there, looking at it in the mirror. Okay. Anyway. Yo miro el espejo. This right here, this mirror is not a person, believe it or not. And so I simply say, yo miro el espejo. But if the thing which is getting looked at is a person, I must put the word a before the word referring to the person, which in this case is muchacho. So yo miro a el muchacho. Yo miro a. Notice what he's got in his hand. You ever notice that up close? He's got una rana. He's got a frog in his hands. So yo miro la rana. I look at the frog. It's not a person. Now, if you kissed it, maybe. No, it's not. How's it work? It doesn't matter. Yo miro la rana. But yo miro al muchacho. Not a person, no a. Person, a. Yo miro al muchacho. Now, why am I saying al, by the way? Why al muchacho? When I talk about Freddy, yo miro a Freddy. Why is it yo miro al muchacho? Well, it's because el muchacho is the boy, right? A and el form what's called It's called a contraction. A and el is al. And so yo miro al muchacho. Not a el, but al. Yo miro al muchacho. So let's go back to the sentence here. I have no idea where we are. Okay. Te gusta conocer. Si te gusta conocer y ayudar. Now, before I go to the niños here, here's the one doing the action. Here is one of the actions we're talking about. Here's another action we're talking about. And here are the ones who are getting helped and being known. They're called the direct objects in the sentence. And so they are people. These are children. Some children are people. And so you're going to put a here before los niños. Me gusta conocer y ayudar a los niños. And that was all that was different between B and C. You like that? Let's move on. So at least when you hear me say in the middle of a sentence sometimes, you wonder, why is he saying before the name of that person? That's why. It's because that person, or the word referring to the person, is the one who's getting something done to it. Okay? Having something done to it, by like watching or helping or whatever. Not the one doing the action, the one to whom an action is being done. Okay, vamos, número 9. For all you high school students, you're the ones who checked out a few minutes ago. Número 9. Entonces, miren, número 9, A, B, C, D. Think how you'd say this. Y vamos pues. A. Usted lee algunas revistas. B. Usted lee las revistas. C. Usted lee unos revistas. D. Usted lee algunas revistas. Otra vez. A. Usted lee algunas revistas. B. Usted lee las revistas. C. Usted lee unos revistas. D. Usted lee algunas revistas. Now that last explanation for number 8 was so complex and so required such creativity in my mind. From me, I don't really know that I want to get too deeply into definite and indefinite articles. But I'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into the grammar here. All that was different. Every sentence said usted lee, which was correct, okay? The key is this picture right here, talking about revistas, more than one magazine. When you say the magazines, when you say the, just one of them, the magazine, la revista. The magazines, plural, las revistas. But when you want to say a magazine, it's either going to be the word un or una. By the way, which is it? Is it going to be una revista? Have you figured out by now? Yeah, the sound a at the end of revista tells you it's the kind of a word which normally has a la before it when you learn it, la revista, not el revista, but la revista. And if you say la revista for the magazine, you're going to use una when you're saying a magazine or one magazine, a magazine, una revista, okay? But the point is, this is not just one of them. Now you've got a choice when you want to say some magazines, which is what we're trying to represent here. I don't know if there are 3 or 10 or 8 or 7 or 4. I have no idea the quantity. I'm just saying some magazines. I've got an option. I can use unas or algunas. They both mean some. Both words they're synonyms. It mean the same thing. So, usted lee unas revistas, usted lee algunas revistas. Either one is a possibility. Note that I won't say unos revistas or algunos revistas. Can you hear already the os ending does not match with the as ending in revistas? Yeah. Unas revistas. Algunas revistas. Unos revistas. They don't fit, do they? I could go into more detail about that, but I don't want to. So just believe me. All right? That's algunas revistas or unas revistas and not unos and algunos. Basta. So what we've done today is we did 2 activities. We moved from conversation when we were just talking for 20 minutes back and forth and you were going like a house of fire. And we moved to kind of brushing up on some of the grammar points that would allow you to say things maybe more correctly if you were to understand those grammar points. And that's really the way in which your learning should take place. It's the way your learning took place when you were 2 years old. When you were 2 years old, you could speak like, or 2 to 3, you could speak like crazy to the extent your parents maybe wished you'd slow down or wouldn't say so much. They'd like a little silence. But you said lots of things incorrectly, right? And eventually, with experience, you refined your speech where you were saying things more and more correctly. And that's the same way it is. It really should be when you're learning a language now. It's more important right now that you can talk with me fluently, even if you're making some mistakes, than it is that you speak perfectly, but can only say yes and no. That's my philosophy anyway, and I'm sticking by it. And so that was how we moved from conversation to structure or grammar today in this class. That's really the way you should be moving as you're going through the Ulat. Okay. Espero sinceramente que ustedes sientan que están haciendo progreso. I sincerely hope you guys feel that you're making progress. I think you gotta be. If you are, write me an email. I'd like to hear about it. I'd like to hear about how things are going in your household. Okay. Nos vemos la semana que viene. Next week we will have an interview with a gentleman from Puerto Rico. Entonces, hasta la semana que viene. Adiós.